Three,
I'd like to thank each and
two,
every one of
and
you
one.
for listening to our show each week. We have the most intelligent audience of all networks. We have really informed listeners, and but today I'm also joined by my superstar panel, Attorney Vanita Banks, expert in cybersecurity, Madison Tax, former president of the National Bar, and many other important entities, and Attorney Milton Grimes. But before I get started, I'd like to thank all of you that I see out and about in the streets. And now I find myself talking to people in grocery stores and stuff. It's interesting. And I know this topic with Clarence Thomas really rattled a lot of people. And but there was one that I didn't get to last week, and we're going to cover some important topics today. We're going to talk about the Trump verdict and things like that. But one of the things that I didn't get to last week was Fox News Network, and it had to do with Tucker Carlson. And as you recall, we talked about Fox paid out $787 million to Dominion Voting based upon materially false defamatory statement made during the 2020 presidential election. There was a number of statements made that questioned the integrity of the system. There were some unfounded allegations. There's still multiple lawsuits still pending. And that's very important because those additional lawsuits could be significant in terms of additional evidence being developed. But one of the craziest pieces of evidence that I saw that with the comment made by Tucker Carlson, their superstar network analyst at the time. Here's what he said. According to the news report, a couple weeks ago, I was watching video of people fighting on the street in Washington. Carlson texts a producer. A group of Trump guys surrounded an Antifa kid and started pounding the living SHIT out of him. It was 3 against 1, at least. Jumping a guy like that is dishonorable, obviously. It's not how white men fight. Yet, suddenly I found myself rooting for the mob against the man, hoping they would hit him harder, kill him. I really wanted them to hurt the kid. I could taste it. Now, he later came off and said that he thought that then somewhere deep in my brain, the alarm went off. This isn't good for me. I'm becoming something I don't want to be. So, of all the things he said on TV, some analysts suggest that this was one of the incidents that caused his termination, but I disagree with that based on the available evidence because this is something he had said a long time ago that they knew about, and they lost a lawsuit. I thought that their garbage they espouse each night on TV resulted in successful litigation against the company for other reasons. And also, there's a series of incidents that is important. Now, before my superstar panelist, Attorney Banks, did you read and what do you think about this Carson issue? I just thought that I can't stand to watch the guy on TV and get riddance.
Thank you, Attorney Lee, and good morning, listening audience. I just think that statement it could have contributed. It could have been the straw that broke the camel's back. Actually, I think that the verdict, more than anything else, was a substantial contributor, and that those statements, his statements, was just the latest example of his ongoing racist, sexual, and misogynist statements that he's made throughout his career. And that statement may have been, again, the straw that broke the camel's back, but no surprise for my perspective from Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, okay. Producer, let's go to the line and get one of the callers. I see people are eager to talk to us today. Caller, you have a question for us today. Hello? Did we lose our callers, producer? Okay. Now, the other issue is that there are other lawsuits pending regarding the 2020 election. This is something that just won't end. We have criminal investigation ongoing and incomplete. We got civil litigation, and we're relitigating the 2020 election. Now, for the folks that forgot about this election, there was about 74 million folks in America voted for Donald Trump, and over 81 million Americans voted for Joe Biden. So Joe Biden got over 7 million votes, popular votes, than Donald Trump. In every state that matters, Joe Biden won. So he had a significant electoral college victory also. And speaking of electoral college, I think it's high time for us to get rid of that. It outlived its usefulness. They're giving states too much power, the smaller states, and they're ignoring the voice of the people. True democracy, in my opinion, requires that the majority of people should win. And this is nothing that I thought of overnight. I've always felt that the majority of American citizens should decide who the president is. If we'd had that, for example, Hillary Clinton would have been the president over Donald Trump. And going back each election, Ronald Reagan had a big landslide victory in popular votes and electoral votes, and that made sense. So it worked in our system very well. So I don't want to deviate from that. Okay, Mr. Pullen, what's your question or comment today, sir?
Oh, good morning, Nate, and good morning, Vanita. I can't wait for Milton to come on, because I was ready to jump Milton this morning about some things going on out in LA, but I'll put those in the comments. Vanita, I think they sworn in Mayor Johnson yesterday. I'm not sure. I think they swore him in. But I know y'all having a big problem up there with all the immigrants bused to Chicago. At some point, they're probably going to come here to Indianapolis. And my thing on the immigration thing is, and I'm just going to say it, those people need to be sent back, but I know they're not. But they need to be sent back. And the reason is, they're coming into the country the wrong way to begin with. And if we let them in, then why not let everybody else in who just wants to come to the United States? And they're putting them in Black communities like they're doing up there in Chicago. They're going to clear them out, and they're going to put them down there in South Shore and some other places. And Nate, maybe you can address what's going on here in Indianapolis. What's the plan? What's the mayor's plan for Indianapolis if that happens? But I just wanted to hear what they're doing up in Chicago, because I know a lot of the residents up there are upset.
Absolutely, Pierre. And on Friday, immediate past Mayor Lori Lightfoot was clapped out of office. That's a tradition in the city of Chicago with an outgoing mayor, and incoming mayor or mayor-elect Brandon Johnson will be inaugurated and installed on Monday. But you're right, the immigration, there's a huge immigration problem here in Chicago because we're one of those sanctuary cities, and it's just a really complex problem with mayors such as in Texas and other places sending immigrants to Chicago. And so Chicago has become overwhelmed by this crisis and is working to try to address it as best as possible. Look, we need a comprehensive immigration strategy and policy that currently is not in place. And so it's a huge problem, and one that, as you state, will ultimately, flow into other cities like Indianapolis, for example. But it's a huge problem. And also to your point about African American locations are being inundated as opposed to the greater city at large. So it's just a really huge problem.
Okay, let's take one caller. Hold a second here. Ms. Green, you have a question or comment for us, ma'am, about this issue? I'm sorry, Tina?
Hello?
Yes, what's your question or comment today, ma'am?
Yes, my question is, I had an incident. One has a prior, one don't. They're out for 30.
I can't, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I apologize. Can you speak up a little bit?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this what it was. I'm not happy what happened, but my thing is it's just charges. One grandchild had a prior, never been in no trouble. One that had an incident with another guy. Bottom line was, I and my grandson was playing with this girl's gun. Was in her car. Okay. In the process of that, yes, the cops came over and they did what they had to do. Two of the guys got locked up. Problem I had is this: the grandson that had a prior. He was in the car, but he had some reason the police kept running the one that had a prior, even our people was like, who wouldn't know? Why are y'all running his name? Even though he has a prior, why are y'all running his name for him to?
Okay.
Problem I have.
Ma'am, here's what I need you to do.
Kids out here doing a lot of things.
Ma'am, call this number. Caller, can you hear me?
Running the other grandchild to because he had a prior, they wanted to put this gun charge on him. Now, I think the first time it happened, it won't be the last time.
Okay, hey caller, can you hear me? Hey, call this number because I can't hear clearly what you're saying. Call this number 463-204-0419. 463-204-0419. Okay, let me take Mr. 463-204-0419. 463-204-0419. Okay, now.
Hello, Brother Nate. Brother Nate.
Yes,
Brother
sir.
Nate?
What's your question coming for us today, sir?
All right, Brother Imhotep, how you doing? A couple of things I want to throw in there, and one ties in with this immigration that Pierre was talking about. Bill, I think it's 1718 or 1752 that was passed in Florida, and now you have an exodus of undocumented workers leaving construction sites. Isn't that, my mother was telling me that probably is going to end up in court because immigration is the federal government is solely responsible for immigration policies. So you see the new Florida bill getting challenged in court concerning that. And then number two, Virginia, I guess it was a case in Virginia, a young man, 20 years old, brought that I guess Virginia had a law restricting gun sales to those under 21 and the federal court just struck that down and said with the decision that was back in December, the national rifle, New York rifle, whatever it was, that you cannot restrict gun access to under anybody under 21. That was, so I was just wanting your opinion on both of those, and how do you think that will affect policy? Because in that decision in December, Clarence Thomas wrote the majority opinion. He did say that the states could choose to regulate how they choose. Now we see that that's been knocked down. So just wanted to get your opinion on both of those. And thanks to the immigration bill in Florida federal court, and then the Virginia bill, the Virginia law being struck down in federal court on gun purchases under 21. Thank you.
Attorney Banks, you have any response to that?
I did see where the judge in Virginia struck down federal laws that would block the handgun sales to buyers over 21 and under a 21. And, this is a case that could, of course, prompt the rollback of regulations as a result of the Supreme Court's sweeping expansion of gun rights last year in the U.S. Supreme Court case that the caller mentioned. The federal judge in Virginia ruled that 18 to 20-year-olds cannot be prohibited from buying handguns. He declared the law unconstitutional.
Well, here's my problem. My problem is that in America, we have proliferation of gun violence. More people are being killed in America every day than anywhere else in the world, even in war zones. And because we're 3% of the world population of private, but we're 51% of the world's private gun ownership. So I don't know why a political party has adopted the NRA mantra and think that the solution is to have more guns. In fact, what is more idiotic in our state, we're having too many lunatics that are getting guns. We need to have background check, mental health evaluation of people, and they need to get licensed. Get fingerprint license. You don't want a person who has domestic battery to get a gun. What do you think that person's going to do? See, law enforcement can't prevent those type of homicide. They just can't. So we have somebody who is abusive to folks, abusive to their spouses. You can't have a police staying at their house. And so that person is going to accelerate the misconduct, which will eventually lead to death or serious injury. So for that reason, I'm a big proponent of the Second Amendment, but I'm not a proponent of having unlimited access to guns, especially guns of mass destruction. I think that as Americans, that we should work very hard to get rid of this cancer in our society. It's just not good for us at all.
And more than 1/2 of all gun violence occurs in 6 countries. And guess what? The United States is one of those countries. Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Guatemala, Venezuela, and the United States. The gun violence that we see virtually every day, it's uniquely an American phenomenon. We have more guns than people in the United States.
Oh.
And
Okay.
not a day that goes by that we don't see or hear about another mass shooting. And firearms have now exceeded auto accidents as the leading cause of death for young people under age 17. And there's no place in our society for weapons of mass destruction. And we've seen this false equivalency being offered that, the Constitution, it permits citizens to have, guns. That is, no one is saying that Individuals should not possess a gun for hunting and shooting and to protect, their home. But weapons of mass destruction are just absolutely unacceptable. And it's just basically, it's a false equivalency.
Okay, the next issue, thank you very much. That's very important information. Let's talk about the verdict that we witnessed that happened the first time in American history. The scene is the former president of the United States had accusation by a number of witnesses for sexual assault. It was over 20, as I recall. And then these were allegations. And we were talking off the record, and Attorney Banks updated me to educate me about the new law in New York that allowed these sexual assault victims statute of limitations to be extended to allow them to file a lawsuit. So one of the persons that filed a lawsuit was E. Jean Carroll against Donald Trump. And United States District Court, Southern District of New York, cause number 22 CV 10016. Now, I'm going to read you the verdict of that case. It was a remarkable verdict, and I think that everybody needs to get a clear understanding before you get what the people say on TV, in particular some of the news commentators like Fox completely ignored it when I watched it. Here's the verdict. The verdict form first talked about battery. And the issue of battery is an unlawful touching of a person. Did Ms. Carroll prove by preponderance of evidence that Mr. Trump raped Ms. Carroll? Answer, no. But part two, Mr. Trump, did the evidence show that Mr. Trump sexually abused Ms. Carroll? Answer, yes. And was Ms. Carroll injured as a result of Mr. Trump's conduct? Yes. If so, what is the fair amount of money to adequately compensate her for the sexual battery? Answer, $2 million. That's her sexual battery. Second part, was Mr. Trump's conduct willfully or wantonly negligent, reckless, or done with a conscious disregard of the rights of Ms. Carroll? Answer, yes. So how much is the damages for punitive damages for this misconduct? Answer, $20,000. Now, the third issue, defamation. Did Ms. Carroll prove by preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Trump's statement about her was defamatory? Answer, yes. Did Ms. Carroll prove by clear and convincing evidence that Mr. Trump's statement was false? Answer, yes. Did Mr. Trump make the statement with actual malice? Yes. Was Mrs. Carroll injured as a result of Mr. Trump's publication of the October 12, 2022 statement? Yes. If so, what is the damages to her reputation as a result of the misconduct? Answer, $1 million. Now, what is the amount of damage for the damage to her reputation? Only $1,700,000. Now, the final one, in making a statement that Mr. Trump acted maliciously out of hatred, ill will, spite, or wanton, reckless, or willful disregard of her rights. Answer, yes. If so, how much punitive damages should he receive? Answer, $280,000. So, folks, this was a jury of Donald Trump peers who basically said, in a nutshell, that he's a rapist and a liar. Very shocking that you would hear such a verdict against a former president. This is the first time in American history that we've had a proven allegation of rape, sexual assault by a former president. It's an incredible thing in American history. Attorney Banks, this verdict, to me, when you read the actual verdict, was shocking.
And that's why it's important to read the verdict form, Attorney Lee, and I'm glad that you shared that form and the details regarding that verdict, because it was reported $5 million, roughly $3 million on one of the charges, the two charges, as you stated, assault, well, sexual assault or battery and defamation. And we were hearing compensatory damages of nearly $5 million on both of those counts. But the average person, unless we dug deeper, did not see that there was punitive damages that were awarded in the case. And those damages are meant to penalize and deter the conduct. Now, keep in mind that there were 9 jurors in this case, 6 men and 3 women, and they deliberated for less than 3 hours before they came back with this verdict. And again, I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is unprecedented in U.S. history. And of course, he didn't even bother to show up, although when you to face the charges, although as an attorney, you would seriously weigh whether or not you would put him on the stand, because he would have testified, Attorney Lee, probably similarly to how he discussed that verdict in the CNN town hall meeting the other day. And so it was just as well, I'm sure from his attorney's perspective, that he didn't come to New York to actually testify in the case. But again, just mind-boggling. There were 11 witnesses, evidence, compelling evidence against him, included the fact that there was evidence introduced that she told 2 friends what happened to her contemporaneously with the event. Of course, there was his own testimony during his deposition that can probably go down in history as well, Attorney Lee, as to how not to give a deposition. But just again, mind-boggling. He mistaken the plaintiff, Miss Carroll, for his ex-wife in one of the photos, as he was saying that she, quote, was not his type, but actually referred to her as his wife. And so just, evidence of his perspective, his jaded perspective that all women look alike. He sees them as objects. And this is a civil case, keep in mind, where the burden of proof is a preponderance of the evidence. And this case got down to one question: who was telling the truth? It was a battle of credibility, and he came up short. And the jury awarded nearly $5 million in this case.
Well, the thing that I thought, the evidence I saw, they showed a portion of his videotape deposition. And this is very informative because these are really good lawyers, because a lot of people do depositions, they do transcript. But here, when you videotape it, you get to see exactly what he said. It was clear and unambiguous. And one of the questions they asked him was the Hollywood story, when he was getting on the bus and he talked about how they would grab certain private parts of women. And they asked him about that issue. And he's basically agreed that the big stars are allowed to do that, grab women by the private parts. And which is a shocking statement. I mean, it was not only is it legally wrong, it's just downright ignorant. But he then the lawyer then asked him, well, are you or star? Yes. So in other words, in his mind, he thought it was okay to be a serial sexual assaulter of women, which is insane. So we got 23 women that make these allegations. So the question you have to ask yourself, are all these women chronic liars? What would be the motivation to say that this man assaulted them? Why would this lady come forward and have it substantiated and verified by a jury? These federal jury trials are hard to win. They're hard, folks. They're no cakewalk. I mean, your rules of evidence are really tight. Your burden of proof is hard. And that preponderance of evidence, when you go in those courtroom, a lot of time it's not that simple. And so you have to really fight in those courts to litigate the issue in order to win the case. Now, we have another caller. You have a question for us, caller?
Oh.
Yes, sir. What's your question or comment?
Hi, calling to you. Wanted to hitchhike on what you were just saying. Donald Trump. It seems that, to my knowledge, basic losses in court, and a connection. One I'm familiar with, boat situation, county lawsuit with John Barton, lost that, and then last thing about the Navy case is beauty queen from Indiana. She was at Indiana University at one time, so there's an Indiana connection. Important development that has occurred in the last few days is our Republican Senator Todd Young on the news as saying that he will not support Donald Trump, President of the United States. Not sleep on this. Could support him in that position. I would urge those that are interested to support him in terms of calling his office, support, mail for support, and other way that you support that position.
I didn't quite understand the question, Nate. This is Milton.
Yeah, this week, thanks for joining us. This week, what he said is, and after the town hall meeting, as I understand it, we had a number of senators came out in opposition to supporting Trump for president for 2024. One of those senators was Todd Young of Indiana. Todd Young is an attorney and a former Marine Corps officer. And from what I've heard is that he appears to be a fair, conscientious guy, and particularly in Indiana, he has been solid in terms of judicial appointments. He's supported the appointment of 2 African-American U.S. attorneys here in Indiana and the federal appellate court judge. He led the effort to get Doris Pryor confirmed, although he's Republican and by a Democrat. So I've been happy with him in terms of his progress in appointment of federal officials. But he came out this week against Donald Trump. But I think that any American who cares about democracy, any American cares about the rules of law, any American who cares about protection of women from sexual assault, the verdict is clear. How could you support an individual that is so morally bankrupt, that ignores constitutional norm, who fails to announce the result of election by the people? Where in 2 elections, you got almost 11 million more people voted against you than for you. And a lot of people are not thinking about that. They say he's got all these followers, but man, if you add up the totals, he's got the most votes against him in American history. and yet he want to run for a third time rather. So my thought process is that I understand what the caller is talking about, but I mean, I think that Todd Young made the right decision.
I agree with you. Donald Trump is doubling down again on his wrongs. He's ignoring public opinion. He's making you question yourself if you don't accept him. I read recently that people are critical of CNN for giving him a platform, even though they interrogate him and question him pretty strenuously. It still gave him a platform to run his regular bull. So we do have to, at some point, stand up to Donald Trump and say no.
Well, here's something that I need the audience to understand, that I thought that the networks, in particular CNN, completely missed the boat on, folks. Now, here's something very important. We run a monumental task coming up in terms of a federal debt. We're trying to get an extension. Now, the Democrats, the news media are not giving you accurate information about this. Let me tell you real quickly why I'm concerned about this. The federal debt, as historically will show us, we looked at this from 1929. In 1929, we had a crash. The federal debt was zero. Between 1929 and 2016, the federal deficit grew to $21 trillion. So in about 90 years of running this country, we developed a deficit of 21 trillion. In 42 months under Donald Trump as president, we accumulated $7 trillion in a deficit. $7 trillion more under one president in 42 months. And
3 years.
Everybody said that he's doing a great job, not realizing that here's the way you look at this, folks. If you had a credit card that gave you a $100,000 line of credit, and in 3 years, you took that credit card and ran up a $300,000 debt, you spent lavishly. You will have a great experience, but that's not based on what you did. You were successful because of borrowed money. And so the commentaries are ignoring the fact that this was the worst train wreck in American history. His run of the federal government resulted in the highest increase in the federal deficit in American history. He's 25% of the federal deficit that went on for almost a century. And yet the news media don't accurately cover that. And I don't understand why. I mean, if you look it up, it's pretty simple. 21 to $28 trillion is very simple math. That's 25%. And so it's not like he did 10%. He's 25% of the federal deficit. And I saw this commentator, this Republican congressman from Florida, was saying how great of a job, and that Joe Biden is running the country into deficit. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Donald Trump created the biggest deficit in American history. Make no mistake. Forget about the fact that the pandemic, the way he handled that, which is a terrible tragedy. But the federal deficit is something that I'm particularly perturbed about, because we're running against a time in which Donald Trump, when he was president, said nobody should ever consider defaulting on American debt. And now he's saying, tell the Republic, go ahead and default so the country go bankrupt. Dumb idea. Okay, Pierre, you had a question for Attorney Grimes. I know you called back. You had a question for Attorney Grimes. Go ahead, sir.
Real quickly, I'm going to skip the part about local activist Nathaniel Lee out there getting a restraining order put against him. I don't know why the LA Times continues to put him up as a black leader in the community. But what I wanted to talk to you about, Attorney Grimes, is this piece of proposed legislation out of the California Assembly, reparations for African Americans. Now, I'm opposed to reparations for a whole lot of reasons, but are y'all trying to turn California into a Republican state? Because if y'all pass that and y'all cut checks to people based on the color of their skin, and y'all gonna turn that whole state into a Republican state. And
well, that
right,
may,
go ahead.
okay, that may be your concern, Pierre, but all my reading leads to an apology and an acknowledgement of doing wrong and paying for it is the way of a civilized society. And I don't fear that reparations will turn California necessarily into a Republican state. I guess you're saying that there will be a backlash, and because of the backlash, the Republicans will take over. I don't necessarily fear the backlash being that efficient, that extreme, or will happen. It just may be a consequence we have to face when we get to it. But I endorse reparation. Other countries have done it to people who have been wronged. The U.S. has done it in some instances. So what do you see so wrong about reparations for slavery?
Real quickly, reparations to repair injustices against Black people, institutional-wise, is fine. But cash payments to people in their hands based on somebody being a slave, them people, we ain't been slaves for 200 years. So I'm like, how you gonna even do that? And I mean, it makes no sense. Now, if you want to talk about the injustices toward Black people, and one of the things that you brought up in your past conversations is how Black workers are having problems with Hispanic supervisors out there, and that aspect of racism and race discrimination on the job. It's coming, especially with all of these immigrants coming here illegally. But no, cash payments based on somebody being a slave 150 years ago, no. But if you want to talk about housing, if you want to talk about jobs and what do you call affirmative action continuing in California, absolutely. Cash payments, you'll turn everybody into a Republican because everybody ain't been a slave. You ain't been a slave. You don't even have standing. So how you going to get a cash payment for something that happened 150, 60 years ago? And
maybe we have to sit down and get a formula to address all those concerns that are intelligent. I understand them that you have, but to just go on and ignore the fact that we had a severe setback in this society because of slavery, I don't think it's fair either, Pierre. And all I'm saying is that addressing the wrong, putting it on the table, let's deal with it, because ignoring is not going to work. It's going to put more of us in prison. It's going to put more of us on the street as being homeless. It's going to affect our society in general. So I think it's to the benefit of all of us, those of us who may get some reparations and those of us who may not get as much in reparations. But we need to address this wrong and stop pretending that everything is okay now because Pierre and Milton Grimes may have gotten an education or our kids may have gotten an education. The majority of people in this country, I think, that are minority are still suffering.
Hey, one thing I need to comment on this. Hey, Pierre, it's something you need to know. I've served on the committee during the Obama administration, and something that was not publicly publicized, but there were reparations paid to Native America. I thought the sum was around $6 billion. It wasn't a terrible amount, but it was not even publicized. And so during the Native Americans are given special benefits, like for example, as part of the Affordable Care Act, they got the subrogation. So even though the Native America didn't have an experience, they got this multi-billion-dollar contract from the federal government as part of what would be perceived as reparation. Reparation, right, by definition, is some form of compensation provided to those who have suffered wrongdoings or to their descendants. So when you say that slavery was 200 years ago, let me correct you on that. My grandfather in Georgia was a sharecropper. As a young kid in the 60s, I went on his farm. And much to my chagrin, I want to stay there one summer, but I didn't realize that they still worked like slaves and got very little money. I remember I wanted to go there, and all of a sudden, after a couple of weeks of getting up at 4:30 in the morning picking cotton all day, that's not what I wanted to do. But that's what sharecroppers did. It was a modern day form of slavery, whereby you always owed the owner, and that was in the 60s, that was only 60 years ago, and so slavery didn't end in America like people thought it did because they passed the Black Code. So slavery and the effects of slavery manifests itself. Even today, we see some remnants of it in certain ways in terms of discrimination, but we had to pass the Black Code, we had Jim Crow laws. So it's not a one-time issue like what people think. It's a mentality, that occurred to human beings, treating other human beings as less than people. So I want to make sure you understand that slavery is not something that happened 200 years ago. The remnants of that still from time to time.
Well, real quickly,
and Pierre, I'm sorry, Pierre, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No,
And the
I'm
racial
reading the
wealth
book
gap, the tremendous racial wealth gap harkens back to slavery. And and to your point, Pierre, you're talking about cash payments. Dealing with the legacy of slavery is about much more than just cash payments. It's addressing those systemic racist policies and laws that have resulted in inequality in housing, education, healthcare, and beyond. And so, go ahead.
That's what I'm talking about, Vanita, that form of reparation. But cash payment, okay, watch this. Let's pay everybody reparations tomorrow. Every black person who was a slave, which President Obama was against, by the way, we're going to pay everybody tomorrow. Now, guess what? After you get your money, get out of my face. I'm done with you. I'm done with the discrimination complaints. I'm done with all of this other argument about we've been treated unfairly and we getting treated unfairly. You got your money. Now get out of my face. Now what you gonna do? Everybody got paid. Come on, Nate. Come on, Milton.
Now what you're going to do is hopefully take that money, and I won't say start a new life, but better your life, better your family's life, better your wealth position in this country, so that you can live as comfortable of a life as everybody who benefited from slavery and injustice towards black people. That's what we're going to do. But I'm damn sure not going to reject it or refuse it just because I'm fearful that the white man or anyone else will say, now that you got your money, what you going to do? Well, give me my money and let's see what I do. I think I can do something constructive. I'm not worried about that.
Black America will be still in the same position 10 weeks later. You got to work on the systemic problem and putting cash money.
I agree with that. I agree with that. That the systemic problem is there, but that doesn't mean that we can't accept reparation, which is a recognition of a serious wrong that was perpetrated by this country. And it didn't stop with slavery. I'm reading this book now by hands now known, talking about Jim Crow law and how it was enforced during the 40s and the 50s, and how black men like you and I and Nathaniel could not only get on the bus and sit where we want, but if we got on the bus and acted like we didn't want to sit where they told us, the bus driver had the right to shoot us in the head, kick us off the bus, and go on to his next stop. And the families would just be left with nothing. So it's time to recognize those wrongs and address them, Pierre. I disagree with you.
Okay, stop, Pierre. Let's go to Imhotep next. Imhotep, your response?
Yes, Nate, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Nate?
Do you have a response to that?
Okay. Yes, I do. And then Attorney Grimes, thank you. You've been on point. You guys are on the razor's edge. first of all, reparations, the root word is repair. So first of all, no one, especially of African-American descent or even my African brethren and sisters I talk to from the motherland are against repair. Belgium, France, Portugal, all of them are right now in talks. England, sending all those artifacts back to countries in Africa and stuff like that. All of them are in talks to be repaired, Pierre. Right. It's a lot larger than what you're talking about. I consider you an intelligent brother, but you are really not sounding intelligent right now. Also, biblically, when you look at the Easter story, Passover. Okay, the story of Passover. These people, most of them call in, are people who in black communities will be Christians. When Moses them left Egypt, they didn't just leave Egypt. They were paid reparations on their way out the door. Remember, Pierre? Remember, Pharaoh gave them gold and silver. He paid them for their time in bondage. They got reparations when they left. You don't believe me? Go read Passover again. When they left, they got reparations on their way out the door. So reparations is not, it's a political thing. Socialist, it covers everything. And so you must, if you view it from the proper lens, then you understand that this thing is even larger than us when you look at the triangle trade, colonialism, imperialism, Jim Crow, enslavement, and all that. Please understand it's larger than that. And all countries now that were victimized by those type of things and those atrocities. King Leopold killed 3 million in the Congo. 3 million people he killed. Belgium is in talks now to repair that. Thanks for my call.
Okay, Gwendolyn is
Thank
next.
you.
Go ahead, Gwendolyn.
Hi.
Gwendolyn,
Yes. Can you hear me?
loud and clear. Go ahead.
Can you
ma'am.
hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. This is a lot to unpack. But I'm going to say this: every other culture who has been done wrong has gotten some kind of something. Native Americans got the reservations. They got the right to do whatever they want on the reservation and to maintain their culture. Even when we have tried to get beyond slavery to build our own communities, to build our own businesses, what happened? They went back and they took that from us. So it's not just about slavery. It's also about the fact that they were not going to let Black Americans have anything. And so what you want to do is you want to repair that mistake. Also with Asian Americans, when they put them in encampments, they got something. And they weren't here as long as we were, and they got something. And so what I'm saying is, it's about repairing. And let me say, all those groups that have had some type of quote reparations have also never been held to that if we discriminate you in the future, you have no recourse, no legal recourse to claim that you discriminated against us because we paid you something. Those two just don't go together. Now, with all due respect to Mr. Pullen, reparations is something that's necessary for our history and our country to get beyond slavery. It does not make it so that just because we get beyond slavery, we still don't have to deal with discrimination and racism and all of that. Those are separate issues. Yes, you have to come up with policies and procedures to make sure that systemic racism doesn't continue. But reparations is only to get us on maybe one footing. And to say that all Black people are going to squander their reparations and we're just going to end up in the same place is saying basically that you believe what white people believe about Black people, that we are not responsible, that we are not fiscally responsible, that we don't have any other goals other than to just get money. It is not just about money. It's about dignity. It's about our ancestors. It's about all that our ancestors have sacrificed to make sure that we can carry this on, and we carry it on with dignity. That's what it's about. And that's all I have to say at the moment.
Well,
Thank you.
One closing comment to my special guest, starting with Milton. Any closing comments? Attorney Banks?
Just so many issues to continue to unpack involving the debt ceiling, and we didn't even get to talk about the CNN town hall meeting, the disgraceful CNN town hall meeting with Trump.
Right.
And I agree that he should not have been given a platform to continue to spew, lies and hate. And so I look forward to continuing to discuss these issues in our later broadcast.
Attorney Grimes?
It is an incomplete conversation we're having because it's going to take some time to address this matter fully. But this is a start. So I think these conversations are necessary, and these disagreements and agreements are necessary, Pierre. But
Well, I like to
time
think,
for reparation.
yeah, I like to
Go
thank our audience and all our guests, and I'm sorry to all the folks that couldn't get in today. We'll be back on next week, and hopefully we can cover a few additional topics. Like Attorney Banks said, there were so many fascinating legal cases in the news today, and we went on a tangent on this reparation. I think it's an important subject, but there are so many other things that we didn't get to today, so you need to stay tuned for next week. There's always things that are important. So if it's a legal issue, always join Legal Issues of Today with Nathaniel Lee. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing and talking to you next week. Have a blessed weekend and happy